But Taylor, you are in for a treat because our next guest will be the first time you've had a chance to meet him or talk to him. And this is not hyperbole. This is one of the greatest coaches in college sports history. Forget about the sport as in women's soccer. But Anson Dorrance joins us now. And, Coach, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. It's hard to believe. I got football in the brain, but, man, soccer gets cranked up this week. And lo and behold, here are the Heels right in the middle where they always are, near the top. First of all, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. And congratulations on just the longevity of excellence. I mean, you really have been spectacular to watch from afar. It's been amazing to watch your career.
Well, Mark, you're very kind, and it's an absolute pleasure to meet Taylor and also to always speak with you. So, Mark, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
I kidded around with you off the record. Now I'm going to put you on the record. Now I know what the answer is. But I had asked you, does it ever get old? I mean, you've been there for 100 years, and I mean that in all the kindest ways. And you were like, no, man, this is great. I mean, the passion that you have for this sport, I suspect that young people keep you young, don't they?
Well, absolutely. And, that's almost a cliche. I love training these extraordinary young women. I love being a part of their lives in the most positive way. And so working at a great university like this with these extraordinary athletes is an absolute privilege for me. So, no, it does not ever get old.
Ooh, I like those jackets we're showing here in these throwback unis right here. So when it comes to be this time of year and you're so close you can taste it, but you still have a few days until you really get cranked up, what's the emotion you feel every time you enter this portion of the year?
Well, honestly, my favorite time of year is preseason. You want to see if you've recruited well, and so you get to see these extraordinary kids that have signed up to join you. You want to see if the upperclassmen did the work in the summer to come back fit. And our kids did. We had a record number of kids pass fitness. I'm talking about a record number of kids pass fitness for a program that's been in the thick of it every year. And we've never had 20 kids in preseason pass our draconian fitness test. So I'm very proud of the work they did coming in, proud of the kids we've recruited, and we can't wait to get going.
Coach, when you said fitness test, look, I did not play great soccer growing up, but in high school I played, and you just brought me back to, I think, a little bit of PSD. We had to get our mile under 8 minutes, and 8:02, 8:03, and you had to run it every day until you got it, and I never got it, Coach. So, yeah.
Well, listen, you're sharing the old draconian fitness tests, which were Cooper runs. They've changed a bit now. We call these things beep tests. All you've got to do is to run 20 yards out or 20 meters out, 20 meters back, and then a noise goes off. And, of course, the noise gets faster and faster and faster until you're eventually eliminated. So maybe you would do better on the beep test than you did in those mile runs.
I think you're right, Coach.
You know, Coach, we'll do a deep dive on your team. I'm always fascinated by incredibly successful coaches. And we just put a graphic up that almost looks like a typo with 21 national championships. And I know you're not the type to look backwards. It's always about the next play moving forward. What do you do in the off season as far as an incentive? Things that you read. Maybe you hear another coach say something. Could be from another sport. I'm always curious what coaches find for motivation, which is something other than what happened last year.
No, you're absolutely right. And I had the privilege this last spring of actually teaching a course at the University of North Carolina. And so for me, a lot of the stuff we're experimenting with now are stuff that I learned from my co-professors and teaching the art and science of expertise at the University of North Carolina last spring. So for me, yeah, I'm always trying to figure out a way to reinvent the wheel, I guess. So yeah, I don't want to stay in the same place. As everyone knows, if you stay in one place, you're finished. And so we're trying to get better in every aspect of our leadership development, our ideas in the game. And so for me, it's a constant effort to see if we can live on what we call this never-ending ascension. So that's the cliche we use with our players. It's also something all of our coaches try to live. So that's our ambition every single fall, to be better than we were last year in all kinds of positive ways in what we're doing with these extraordinary young women.
Anson, give me a for instance of teaching that class of something you, like I said, it could be a motto, maybe it was a speech, maybe a soundbite. Give me a for instance of something that really resonated with you in the spring.
Yeah, well, thank you for allowing me to bloviate on this. So basically, one of the hardest things in athletics for these young collegiate women is the leadership side of it. Because the difference between male and females in this area is a lot of women tragically are excoriated for taking the lead. It's almost like their culture doesn't want them to lead, doesn't want them to stand out, doesn't want them to sort of boss the game and be verbal leaders in the field. Men have this wonderful capacity of having a very low bar for their friends and teammates and leaders to clear, and they're not very sensitive. So it's a very easy leadership dynamic. And trust me, I coached the men for 13 years. It's a much different dynamic. In the women's game, the challenge is, whenever you open your mouth, you're afraid of what your teammates are thinking of you. So the thing we talked about in this class last spring is this thing we call loving critics. And we want to create a culture where we would embrace our critics, the verbal leaders on the field, and encourage them because they love us and they want to take us to higher levels, to allow them to be critical. So not only does the culture have to embrace loving criticism, but we have to take it as a moral imperative to lead, to verbally lead the team. So this is something we talked about in the class last year. Our challenge this fall is to see if we can create this wonderful culture of loving criticism, where we embrace criticism because it's basically the standard, but we embrace each other because that's all the loving criticism is all about, trying to get each young woman to be the best version of herself.
Anson, how much of that is actually parking your ego, where you say, hey, listen, guess what? We're all in this together. Let's go.
You are absolutely right. I mean, humility is such a critical quality when you're basically trying to develop a great culture. And yes, it's a combination of both, having the people that have the courage to lead verbally, but also you're absolutely right, Mark. You've got to park your ego. And it's always got to be about the team and the team's mission. And it's so difficult sometimes in athletics where we have these glorious resumes of these amazing athletes, and yet what you have to ask them to do constantly, if you want to have an extraordinary culture, is to have them park their ego, like you're saying.
Yeah, it's one thing to be physically great, but mentally great is where you're trying to get this team as well. I love that. So 9 of your 11 starters from last year's team that went to the national championship game are back. How have you seen that experience? And I know you have tons of years of experience making deep runs and winning national championships, but how have you seen the ladies from last year translate that to this year, that experience?
Well, first of all, they've been wonderful in preseason, but keep in mind, there's more than just 9 players coming back that started. This young woman on the ball that you just saw is Macy Bell. She's one of the best players in collegiate soccer. That player you just saw and that one serving, she was out last season as well. So basically, 2 of my best players in the past 5 years are now returning off the injury list. So for me, yep, we got the 9 starters back, but we have 2 All-Americans back that were injured this past fall. So actually, we counted it up one day. We have 12 starters back, and then we've got an incoming recruiting class that was considered the #1 class in the country that also have a whole collection of young women that will compete to start. So we certainly have a talented collection of young women. Certainly wonderful experience coming back, but also some great young kids that will also make their mark.
I know you got a top 10 matchup with Penn State coming up Thursday to start things off, but here we go again with the ACC. Only 7 teams ranked in the top 25, Coach, 5 in the top 6. It's the same old, isn't it? I mean, the competition in this league is just unlike anything else.
It is. It's extraordinary, and I certainly tip my hat to my colleagues in the ACC because every single game is a dogfight. And every team in this conference can beat any other team on any given day. So you don't go into any game feeling secure. And I just want to credit my colleagues for helping make this league the best in America. I love recruiting to that. We recruit with our opponents. Yeah, the ACC is just extraordinary in every respect in all the sports across the spectrum, but certainly women's soccer.
What's the method to your madness when you are scheduling? Because you have 9 ranked teams on the schedule. A lot of that has to do with the ACC being so great. But you go out of your way, you schedule a Penn State, which is a top 10 showdown now. What is behind your scheduling method?
Well, first of all, that's a great question. I want to answer it because our policy in the old days was we'd find out which team in the country was returning a remarkable roster and a team that we would consider a team we could play in the national championship final. And our philosophy back in the old days was to travel to that great team and see how we did. Now, obviously, if we lose to that great team away in the first game of the season, we have the rest of the year to recover from it. So that team would set a standard for us, and then we would try to match that standard. Now, obviously, if we go up there and play well against Penn State and happen to get the win, that puts us in a wonderful position to get top NCAA seeding. So for us, it's a win-win. Even if we lose the game, it's a win-win. Because now, they showed us where we're exposed, we have to get better, and now we have to improve. And so we want to schedule great teams early. We want to play the best schedule in the country. We want our young women to get better every single season. So for us, playing the best schedule in the country every year is not just an ambition for us, it's a requirement if we want to compete at the highest level every single year.
Anson, you've always had an international flair with everything that you've accomplished at North Carolina. How cool was it, though, to have an international friendly right there in the backyard of Chapel Hill, North Carolina last month? That had to be something else.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. And by the way, my wife and I are huge Welcome to Wrexham fans. But I'm also, in like almost every soccer coach in America, all of us follow the English Premier League. Oh yeah, here I am. And this was the fake coin toss. And so they told me I had to toss the coin. I went out there. The referee would not give me the coin. The referee tossed the coin by himself, which obviously was a bit depressing. But are you kidding me? Over 50,000 in Kenan Stadium, and there, of course, is Mac and Coach Davis, two of our extraordinary coaches with our major sports here. And Mac encouraged us to have this game. Coach Davis was there supporting all of us, and it was just a wonderful event. I mean, I had people that I didn't know I was related to asking me for tickets because they thought I was going to introduce them to Ryan Reynolds. And so it was an amazing event for us. And I had every person I'm related to in town sitting with me in that stadium, and it was just incredibly enjoyable.
As far as the U.S. women's national team, and I know they got knocked out earlier than anybody anticipated and all this stuff, and I want to get on a political rant here. What was your take watching them from afar on that ultimate platform and situation?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you asking me that question because I fully support them, the mission they were on, but also their performance. It's sort of interesting, and I sent this out in an e-blast to all of our alumni, all of our players, which of course included the two players that start for the United States at left and right back, in Crystal Dunn and Emily Fox. In a soccer game, you're always playing against two adversaries. You're certainly playing against an opponent, but you're also playing against the game itself. And honestly, Mark, sometimes the harder adversary to beat is the game. We beat Sweden. We beat them to death. We had more possession. We had more clear chances that were created. We beat them to death. What we couldn't navigate was the game itself. Our game, it's incredibly difficult to score sometimes. And what I was telling all of our former Tar Heels, but also certainly all of us that follow the game, is those Swedes are never going to watch that game again for the rest of their lives, including, except for the goalkeeper. Because the goalkeeper was extraordinary for Sweden. But we beat them like a drum in everything except the final score. And so I was very proud of the performance of the U.S. That was our best performance out of the 4 games we played. And so do I think it's the end of the American international sports dynasty in women's soccer? No. We're in wonderful shape. We have great coaches. We have great players up and down the line. We're going to be back. And on that particular day, Sweden did not beat us. The game beat us. And so, trust me, Mark, we're coming back.
I think you're right about that. So are you an England fan this week? Because I know they play Australia in the semis this week. You have 3 former players who play, and then a former player who's a head coach for them. So you're rooting for England?
Taylor, absolutely. And let me share my dream. My dream was to see, England and the United States in the World Cup final. So obviously part of that dream is cashed out. But yeah, we have four former players of ours that are a part of this great English run. I'm very proud of all of them. I'm hoping they end up obviously winning the whole thing. So yeah, we're sitting there with bated breath, watching every shot, every pass, And so now it's, the British are coming, the British are coming, the British are coming. So we're cheering our young English lads on like you wouldn't believe, and we're hoping they can win 2 more games and become world champions.
Coach, it's a real honor and a pleasure having you on, whether it be the old Packer and Durham show, now ACC PM. But like I said earlier, you're one, in my opinion, you are one of the greatest coaches in the history of college sports, and your impact on just more than just soccer is immense. And we always, always appreciate your insight.
Well, Mark, I appreciate that. Do you mind calling my wife and telling her all this stuff for me? I think she's forgotten all this. Would you just give her a call and let her know what you just said?
Anson, if it makes you feel any better, I'll get done with this show and say goodbye to Taylor and Captain Ron and walk upstairs thinking, well, Amy's going to say, well, it was a great show. And it's almost like, yeah, okay, take out the trash. You got to do A, B, and so I know exactly how you feel on that one. Sometimes, as you pointed out, you got to park the ego and know your role. That is incredibly important as far as success and longevity.
Well, how did you know I was the trash collector? I mean, that's
We
incredible.
all are.
Okay, there you go. Okay, good. Well, then you know my role.
That's it. You got it. Listen, keep up the great work. We look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Coach.
Off he goes.